Good afternoon. I am Anamika Srivastava. I am Assistant Professor and Research Fellow at International Institute for Higher Education Research and Capacity Building at OP Jindal Global University. Um, I teach economics, but my area of research is higher education policy. Um, so we are gathered here to discuss the topic of the session, which is sensitizing and empowering teachers and school leadership. About what? About the larger theme of the conference, that is transition from high school to higher education, role of school leadership. It is interesting the way we have thought of the topic of the conference, which is transition from high school to higher education. Who is transitioning? Apparently, it's the students, and that's how we're talking about the entire, the session so far. Students are transitioning. I think parents are also transitioning because they're going to take a very important decision of their life, apparently, very important. Uh, there are concerns. There is overemphasis on social and cultural reproduction, and it is supposedly be the most important stage of choosing the right kind of education, and therefore career choices, and therefore lifestyle, and therefore the kind of social capital and the cultural capital that the students and eventually the person, the individual would gather. Now, if that is the case, then sensitizing teachers and school leadership would not only include being, acknowledging the issues, the socio-cultural, psychological issues of the students, but also of the parents. And when we talk about students and parents, we also need to consider the macro context within which schools are situated, and for that matter, even the students and the parents. We cannot ignore the rise of marketization, knowledge economy, consumerism for that matter. What literature has actually come to refer to as something as shadow education, which was referred to in the first session as coaching institutes, becomes, the shadow of the mainstream becomes actually the mainstream when it comes to transitioning. And, you know, and the power from the school has been taken away completely. So it is this very challenging macro context within which the schools are functioning. And therefore, we need a very holistic and meaningful discussion when we talk about sensitizing of schools and teachers. So we have a very, very eminent panel with us today. We have Dr. Sumer Bahadur Singh, who is former principal, Delhi College, Indore. He has a lot of experience, 14 years of experience at other schools, Lawrence School, and has served as the director of the Asian School as well. He has served as the chairman of Marketing Cum Processing Cooperative for 100 Villages. He was vice president of Sutra, an NGO, and he was also the advisor of education in Government of Punjab. Recently, he has started his own education consultancy under the name of Education Salad and is committed to the broader picture of education in terms of inculcating life skills. We also have with us Sister Cyril Muni, Padma Shri awardee, and former principal, Loreto School, Kolkata. Sister Cyril Muni's work has been also globally recognized as she received the UNESCO NOMA Award for Spreading Literacy and Ashoka Fellowship Award for Social Entrepreneurship, especially for her innovative work with the Rainbow Program for social and academic inclusion of disadvantaged students. We also have Ms. Ruchi Ghosh from Azim Premji Foundation, Bangalore. Ruchi Ghosh is a part of the team that has set up the 6 demonstration schools. In particular, she supports the school principals and design processes for their professional development. Her particular area of interest is educational change. We also have with us Professor Dr. Poonam Batra, from Department of Education, University of Delhi. She's a professor there. She has, she's actually India's leading elementary and teacher education academics with over 25 years of experience in teaching, research, training, management, and consultancy. She was involved with the co-creation of the framework for one of the most celebrated courses of Delhi University, Bachelor of Elementary Education. Professor Batra has been awarded with prestigious national award, Jawaharlal Nehru Fellowship in 2007. She's very renowned. We also have with us Ms. Amita Wattal. Thank you, ma'am, for making it to the panel. Principal of Springdale School. She's also associated with Oslo Coalition, World Council of Churches, IARF, IILM. She has over 25 years of experience in the field of education. She's worked on a number of national and international projects, including a project with UNESCO. So now we have this panel with us. Without any further delay, let's start the discussion. We have 5 panelists, and we have around 1.5 hours for this session. So each speaker would speak for around 12 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have an open house session for another 15 minutes. So may I invite, in accordance to the program schedule, Dr. Sumer Bahadur Singh for his talk.
Thank you for inviting me here, Dave. Very kind of you. And thank you, Sonali. I don't have the soft skills. I don't have a laptop. I don't have a visiting card. And I don't have a presentation. But you've saved me from embarrassment, so thank you. So I'm a very old-fashioned, I'm probably the oldest in this room. I've been... Now, whether it is because there are insufficient places at universities in India, whether it is because there are insufficient, reasonably good universities in India, whether it is because merit admissions are compromised by reservations, whether there is more promise of a better education and better opportunities overseas, whether there is a desire on the part of the student to be a mobile global citizen, whether the subject choices are more flexible in universities outside, or whether it is the marketing of universities from various countries which have become popular in India. Whatever the reason is, the fact of the matter is that for one or more reasons, never before have we had so many students wishing to go overseas for university education. Which leads me to the conclusion that it is not the Indian schools that are doing so badly, it is Indian universities which are letting us down. The students who go from our Indian schools to universities abroad seem to do quite well. So I'm going to turn this whole thing on its head and ask that is it the school that needs reformation or is it our university system? Recognizing the fact that there are so many students wanting to go out because they can't find a good university place in India, there is a great number of, there are a great number of service providers who have emerged to make this possible. And the fact that these service providers have become so popular in such a short period, it's a prerequisite, of course, but there are so many other factors that have become important. One of the factors is that what is your special interest area? What have you done in it? What have you achieved in it? Or how have you spent your time discovering it? Because that indicates that you are more than just an academic person. Secondly, there is great emphasis given today to community service, not because community service is a charitable uh, pursuit, but because community service sensitizes us, makes us better human beings in understanding people and situations that they exist in. Another component which has become important is internship. And it's become quite fashionable now for students to go in for internships, which may or may not actually reflect what they are going to do with it in the future, but has become almost a prerequisite part of a good CV. So if you look at internship, special interest area, community service, and of course the prerequisite of marks, then add to it that you have done something on an international level so that it proves that you are adaptable, adjustable for another country's atmosphere, university atmosphere, and then your CV is pretty organized. And therefore we have organizations which have come up like Univariety from Singapore, which is operating in a big way in India now, where it builds the child's CV from class 9 to 12. It charges the school for doing it, and at the end of it, it sells the CV to universities in India and abroad. And the result is that a child may get an offer of admission or even an offer of scholarship from a university which he has never heard of. Now, this is a new development that is taking place and is making the student more mobile, because there is a limit to the number of universities you can actually physically apply to. I think that I don't agree with what Dev had said about career counseling. I think organizations like the Institute of Career Studies in Lucknow are playing a very important role in helping students understand what is available for them in the future. Because unless you know what is available, how do you make a choice? It is time that we stopped telling children that it is either engineering or medical or an MBA. There's more to life than that. And they don't know about it until they are exposed to it. So I think that is another very important factor that has come into the life of a child. Whether it is good or bad, Dev and I will agree to disagree on, and we can argue about it later. But the fact of the matter is that counselors of all types, of all hues, are springing up everywhere. They're all specialists in their own fields, right from how to write an essay to I don't know what. And of course, I think universities abroad are able to tell when an essay is not written originally, with originality. But whatever it is, there are these people providing services, advice, all over the place. And the result is that schools have given up a primary role that they played of guiding students. Parents are no longer really listening to schools. They feel that the school teacher does not qualify to provide the kind of assistance, advice, information that their child needs. So this is one big disconnect that is developing between schools and parents. Then, of course, you have what has been referred to already, the coaching centers, whether it is for engineering or law or chartered accountancy. There are coaching centers which are running parallel with the schools. There are many schools which have compromised themselves by bringing coaching centers into their schools. And it is almost now reaching a stage where the school is becoming irrelevant for providing an education. It is becoming relevant only for providing a certification which the coaching agency cannot do. So you have these developments taking place, and it's a very serious matter, because if we are going to end up where schools are losing relevancy in interacting with parents, then I think even the idea of having a parent-teacher association becomes less important, because most of the conversations the parents are having about their students are taking place with counselors and not with the faculty. Where schools still play an important role is in selecting the examination board, in selecting the examination system, because this is something which is going to have an impact on the child's thinking, on the child's education in terms of creative thinking, in terms of moving from rote learning and regurgitation to originality. We have boards that encourage plagiarism. We have boards that do not recognize originality or critical thinking. We have boards that are run by bureaucrats who cater to the thinking of the party in power. And we have boards that do not recognize the importance of liberal education. We have boards that are so expensive they create an elite based on wealth, not merit. We have boards that are most widely followed in the world, and we have misconceptions in the minds of parents that one board is better than others for competitive exams, or that some boards are not suitable for overseas education, and conversely that some boards are. In short, parents are left to make decisions on half-baked and second-hand information. So surely schools need to accept that there is a role that they must play beyond organizing classes and examinations. So schools have to reinvent themselves to be able to counter the challenges that they are facing and which are causing parents not only confusion but also much greater expense. So I would urge schools to look at these problems. Now, I've been teaching for 41 years. I've been a principal for 29 years. So I have also had the great benefit of having people like Shomi Das who have been mentoring me. And I think I've taught in all the, in the council, in the CBSE, in IB, in CIE. So having had a fairly wide experience of education, I'm going to make a few suggestions for schools, which are very simple. And that's why I said that I've been teaching for so long and I've been a principal for so long, so that they don't look too simplistic to you, but they are actually fairly simple solutions that I can suggest. One is that teachers must be empowered through in-service training, workshops, conferences, upgrading in their subject, and preparation for the steps in the ladder of their professional career. It is no longer enough to do an MA or a B.Ed. These do not prepare a teacher to think of and employ alternate methods of teaching, and especially in the transition from teacher to facilitator. Corporate team learning and experiential learning is recognized as the most effective. And yet in our factory schools, we sit children facing each other's backs, as though the teacher is a fountain of all knowledge. He no longer is, and we should recognize this. And I may say that the only reason why schools still have students facing the backs of other students is because we have stuffed the classroom with so many children that there is no other way of arranging the furniture. Otherwise, I don't think anyone in their right mind is going to feel that that is the best way of organizing a class. Digital learning through laptops and handheld gadgets must be introduced, but in combination with reading and writing. because reading and writing goes out of the window, we lose a lot. Children do love technology, and so we cannot ignore it. Intercultural learning, critical and original thinking, and conflict management must become an integral part of our education system as it promotes peace. Aggressive and protectionist nationalism must be judiciously combined. Am I doing something wrong?
No.
2 minutes, okay. This aggressive nationalism that we have brought into education is really dangerous. We need to balance it with a worldview. And if students are being exposed more and more to global exchange and travel, then so must teachers be. We cannot have teachers who have not traveled, who have not been exposed, teaching students who are very well traveled. Is a teacher trained to become head of department, deputy head, or principal? We have no such programs in this country. We need to have a system. You are taking 1 minute of my 2 minutes. I think I've touched something which I shouldn't have touched. Community service must be encouraged because it is essential for the integration of the country. Sensitivity to the environment, of course, is a given. We must distinguish in morality between breaking a rule and being caught, breaking a rule and owning up, damaging yourself or damaging others. These are things which we need to give great thought to, because it is how we react to these situations that has an impact on the behavior, the future behavior of a child. To say that science and maths is more important than liberal arts is probably the most unfortunate thing that has happened in many parts of this Asian region. But the others are all realizing that they think times have changed, and we need to also. We need to concentrate in our schools on the individual child, not on the class. That is essential, absolutely. And I would like to add a few life skills which have been neglected. One is that we need to get everyone involved in public speaking. The second is we need to get everyone involved in cooking, because when you leave school and go into higher education or into a job, that is a life skill which all of us need to have. Are you coming to tell me something? No. Competition must be against self and not against others. And here I may mention that sports plays a very important role, because in sport you learn how to lose, fall, get up again, and play again. And it helps people, because we have done some study in Madhya Pradesh and found that children who have committed suicide are children who have never played sport. They're not able to face defeat. It's something which we need to consider. Okay, I've only got about 3 pages left, so I think I'll skip this. Okay, I don't think it's... but I would just like to conclude by saying that students' ability to do well in university and later on in life is not going to be based on the marks that he gets. The marks are only one of the factors that is going to help get the child in. But what happens after that? It is personality, character, networking ability, and skills that are going to make the child a successful career person. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sumer Bahadur Singh. Now we have Sister Cyril Muni with us.
Good morning, everyone. I, first of all, would like to express my gratitude to Jindal University and so on for inviting me here, and also my happiness to be here with so many erudite scholars and people who are interested. In addition to that, I may say that we've had such fantastic talks since the morning, including yours, that most of what I wanted to say has already been said. So I may be, what's that? No, let him do it. You do it. I'm not. I'm like Dr. Singh. I am a dinosaur from a previous era. I managed somehow or other to do something on computers, but I have brought an assistant here who'll work my PowerPoint, because I just haven't got sufficient skills in that area. So starting off, first of all, with regard to sensitizing and empowering teachers and school leadership, I think we have to change the mindsets of teachers and school leadership from getting the highest marks in the final class 12 examination. This is seen by most school leaders. I won't say by all, because we've had many very enlightened school leaders here this morning who have changed the whole view of things. But most people all over India, principals, teachers, parents, as soon as the results are about to be declared, we all know what happens in society and all over. Everyone, the level of tension rises until finally everybody knows where they stand. So getting the high marks in the final class 12 exam is seen by most people as the pinnacle of school success. What do you hear people saying? Oh, how many firsts did you get? What points did you get? Who's gone into which college? And so on. So the pinnacle of success is seen as the final result. And that means, therefore, that this has effect right down through the school, right down to the kindergarten, right down to the 4-year-old admission into nursery. Why do we have examinations for 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds? Why? Because we want to cream off the best little brains so that when they get up to the class 12 exam, they will bring honor and glory to the school and the teachers. I have been doing my admissions. I'm finished now. I was 35 years as principal of Loreto C. Alda, so I had lots of time to implement all my crazy ideas. I began to do admission by lottery 40 years ago. The government of West Bengal has since followed the example. And admission by lottery means the parents are told, we are not in the habit of creating performing monkeys. We are in the habit of creating wholesome children. So there's no academic entrance test. Your child's name will be put into a lucky hat, and if she's lucky enough for her number to come out, then she's a lucky person. And if she hasn't, her number doesn't come out, she is not going to be labeled in her family as a failure at the age of 4. Many children, you hear them, they're only 4 years of age. Oh, she failed to get into this marvelous school, or she failed to get in there. Now, this is a dreadful thing to do to children, and we don't even think about it. We just do it. So, now these young people having been brought in most cases by a competitive entrance test into the 4-year-old nursery. Now they emerge in class 12, and they're sent out now with their 2D classroom certificates, saying how very, very successful they have been in their 2D classroom education. And here I'm not talking about all the smartphones and all those iPods and ePods and other things that are coming around nowadays. I'm talking about 2-dimensional, where everybody sits in straight lines and the teacher lectures. And they listen very carefully, and I have I have a video of, which I took in some of the schools in Calcutta, the government schools, where the teacher walks in, opens the book and begins to read, and all the children are busy entering up the notes, which they will now learn by heart and produce in the exam. But unfortunately, the present system of education does not leave room for the sort of personal experience and capacity building which comes from exposure to the realities of society and the pressures under which adults, including their own parents, often have to live. So when they move out from us after class 12, are they prepared for these kind of pressures when they go into college? We've heard a lot about the college teaching, a lot also about the depression and the loneliness that children, when they go first into college, are subjected to. And I take us back again into our ordinary schools now, because in this new world of consumerism and avarice, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, where competition and greed for power have already led to the destruction of vast natural resources. We read so much about these big companies taking over in some place and destroying everything because they want to quarry ore or gold or whatever it is they're looking for. And in this situation, our children are constantly exposed to messages of self-indulgence and license. They're growing up in a society where they just need to press a button and everything happens. And in addition to that, our current school system has been designed to cater to the children of middle-class urban people, even when it runs in a remote village. Has anyone gone out into the villages and tried to construct a school system which would prepare rural children to move up into third-level universities? The clientele who are satisfied with the schooling imparted are the highly ambitious, upwardly mobile, career-conscious parents. They want good first division marks in the exams, leading on to a lucrative career. They're prepared to pay heavily for the necessary tutors and so forth, which will enable their offspring to prosper. Such parents are also the vocal ones. They constantly reassure the authorities that the school is doing a good job. They provide company resources for school outings and so forth. They give positive feedback from the well-off parents, their high expectation in regard to good academic results, and their increasing demands for admission exert pressures on the principal to maintain the prestige of the school at all costs, thereby creating a strongly competitive atmosphere in which the poorest child often gets pushed out if she ever gets a chance to get into these schools in the first place. Even with the new Education Act, which mandates that all schools should take at least 20% from the deprived sector, this doesn't always happen. Or if they do get in, they drop out after a short period. And it's taken for granted that students, perhaps now we could have a look at the PowerPoint. I've done an analysis of what we do when we educate for community as distinct from competition. You can see there, no, that's all right, it's okay, no, I can see. Emphasis will be, if your education for competition, your emphasis will be on rank, division, marks, prestige, intelligence, appearance, social background, getting ahead of others, or on the other hand, helping others so that all move together. Studies before all else, life and how to live. Examinations, as distinct in community, it will be self-assessment, self-evaluation. Conformity to the norms set for those who wish to get ahead. Freedom to be more creative and to initiate, to work with others. Now, we've had a lot of talk this morning, again, about young people contributing to community. If you look at those two lists, you'll see which side is more designed to produce people who will go into society later on and build up community and care for others. Move on to the next one. What this education results in the competitive system, we have parental and social pressures leading to tension, competitiveness, cheating and lying. We have selfishness to get ahead, materialistic value judgments, and the child's standing depends on her academic achievements or on what she has. And this is one of the things we've talked about this morning also. Dr. Gideon also spoke about it under adolescence. And on the other hand, you get a relaxed atmosphere in which really creative work can be done. And you get a community and group consciousness. You get human value judgments. Children's standing depends on her personal value or on what she is. And this is something very, very important, which I think in many cases our education system has forgotten. We're not producing robots, we're not producing computers, we are producing people. And people are, as we've seen very much with what was said this morning, people are made up of their personality, which has emotions, it has brains, it has intellect, it has all kinds of things. And how much of these are we catering to when we program our children to get the best marks and get into the best colleges? And once they're in the best college, parents say, oh, thank God, now she's settled. Next thing now will be a marriage for her. But let her get these good marks, and then we'll get a good dowry, and we'll get her safely settled down, and then we have all our responsibilities are over. I've got my girl settled. I don't know what they do with boys, but anyway, I don't have much experience with that. Now, we go on, the next one. The final product. In the case of competition, you get a very insecure person because her worth depends on factors outside herself. In the competitive system, you never know who's going to come up against you. And then you only function when you're rewarded. And this is one of the things, you know, you go to Japan and you see 3 men down in a hole digging a hole to put in a new pipe. And that's it. They'll do it because it's their job and it's good for them. You do the same thing in Delhi or in Calcutta, and what do you see? You see 3 men down in the hole digging a pipe, and you see 1 man standing up on top with his hands free, watching them. Why? Why is it necessary that every single action we do in our society has to be supervised? How many of us have supervisors in our schools? I ran a school in Loreto, Cialda for 35 years, and I never once had a supervisor. Every single teacher supervised themselves. Every single child supervised themselves. And constantly at assembly I would be saying, do you need a policeman or you need a teacher? And they say, no, we don't need a policeman. We can look after ourselves. I think if our schools do this kind of preparation, it can help a lot. Anything else? Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, go back. The conformist, since this is the best way to earn reward within the system. Are we producing conformists? And is that one of the problems when they go into university, that they're thrown into a whole milieu where being a conformist doesn't really help, and where they very often don't know what they have to conform to at all? Or on the other hand, a person whose first loyalty is to his own values, since the reward of the system has no meaning for him. So you get people going into university who are prepared to stand on their own 2 feet and make their own value judgments. Watch, 2 minutes, right? We'll finish up very quickly. So the point I'm trying to make here, I won't go into leave the paper, it's all right. The point I'm trying to make here is that we are busy preparing our academic side of our children, and we are not adverting to what kind of values these children are carrying with them into society. We only have to look at our current political system, and I don't want to mention names, but I often ask myself, how many of these politicians who are up giving the most dreadful, horrendous rules and regulations to this country, how many came out from our so-called good English medium elite schools? And if they did, what did they learn? This is something very important for us. I think as teachers and school leaders, we need to go back and look again at our values. And this morning we talked about the reflective system. I have another paper, so I'll be going in more detail into that. But I think it's very necessary. Watch for my 2 minutes. Let me have my full 2 minutes. It's very necessary that we advert constantly to this value system that we are promoting in our schools. And if possible, that we could persuade our teachers, our parents, our children to compete with themselves. Each one of us is a unique person created by God. We don't have God doesn't create clones. So we're all of us unique. So don't compete with anyone else. Compete with your own best performance. And my experience over 35 years as a principal has been that by competing with your own best performance, you really get your best. Because if you're competing with someone else, you remain mediocre. You're only as good as the person you're beating who comes up behind you. Whereas if you compete with your own best performance, then you're constantly striving for something higher and higher. And you carry that out with you into the university and into life. And you're no longer dependent on all the people around you for your identity, for anything else. You are a person in your own right. And I'll come back after. I have another talk in the afternoon. Thank you very, very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Sister Cyril Muni. Now we have Ms. Ruchi Ghosh.
She can make more of them. She's got a pen.
2 minutes.
But I should try.
Oh, well.
Good morning, everybody. When we talk of empowering teachers and school leaders, we equate it with what was mentioned earlier, in-service teacher training, changing mindsets, getting people in a room, telling them what needs to be done, sensitizing them. And some of that is necessary. Of course it is. Today I want to speak about something which I have come to believe is a single most critical lever for change at a school level and empowerment at a school level, along with all of these things. And that's something that I'm talking about, which came up but it didn't get labeled: school culture. What I'm going to say, I'm going to place squarely in my experience with Azim Premji schools. And because a lot of the kind of schools they are possibly quite removed from a lot of the people who are represented here in terms of context, I'm going to begin by briefly telling you a little bit about the schools. The Azim Premji schools are part of the Azim Premji Foundation. The foundation works with trying to improve quality of education in the government education system, not the private education system. Because most children in our country still go to school in government schools. We work on building teacher capacity, empowering teachers, because we believe teacher capacity is critical to change in education. We work in a few states and in primarily backward and disadvantaged areas. As part of our strategy for educational change, we have set up 6 demonstration schools in places such as Tonk and Sirohi and Dhamtari, places perhaps some of you may never have heard of. They are not urban-centric schools at all. The purpose of our schools is to be able to demonstrate to teachers, to head teachers, the functionaries that we work with, that a quality education is possible at a similar cost and with similar conditions and constraints like the government schools. So our schools are similar to government schools in some ways. 75% of our children, we deliberately insist, come from marginalized and disadvantaged backgrounds. We make sure that 50% of our children are girls. Our teachers come from the same gene pool as government teachers, and that sometimes is a problem because they are continually aspiring to government jobs. They're in a perpetual state of giving exams and living in hopeful anticipation. We follow the state board, and the language of instruction is the state language, and we have small schools like government schools. There are 30 children in a class and 1 section per class. It's been 5 years since we set up those schools. And I would be lying to you if I said that we had succeeded in getting to where we had wanted to. We are still on a journey. It's had its own share of challenges, problems, and they still continue. But we've learned a few lessons on the way, and that's something that I want to share. And coming back to school culture, which is what I want to talk about, let me tell you a little bit about the culture of the schools to describe what I mean by culture. The first thing that strikes you if you enter any of our schools is that children are happy and carefree. The operative word is carefree. There is absolutely no fear. they're open, they speak, they ask questions, and they're confident. There is an open relationship with teachers. There's trust, there is affection, and there is mutual respect. Sometimes this creates a problem, especially in the lower classes, because discipline where there is no fear is a challenge. One of the things that we particularly take care is there's no differences between boys and girls. Now, in an urban context, this is nothing remarkable. That's how it should be. But in a rural context, it's not like that. So we pay a lot of attention to trying to sensitize our children to social inequities, gender differences, caste prejudices, things that they encounter on a day-to-day basis. And the way we try to do it is through small things, because the big things have to be lived through small things. So the uniforms are the same. Girls wear pants like the boys. Girls are encouraged and insisted upon, no, you have to play. No, you can't sit out. The rules are the same. We eat together. The midday meal, we provide the midday meal like in government schools, and all children and all the teachers eat together, sitting on the floor, and with the teacher sitting in between children. School celebrations are very simple. The annual day, the sports day, assemblies. The focus is on the children, participation, enjoyment, giving them opportunity, and not on what is the best performance, not on putting on a show and making sure that only the best children perform and the others are made trees or, you know. Yes, he got a part. What was he? His parent didn't even know that he was on stage. We have really striven to create a collegial environment for our teachers. We tried, it's relatively, and I'm using the word relatively, hierarchy-free. The principal and the teachers, old teachers, new teachers, we really try to strive for equality. The principal, like the teachers, has a desk, a locker, and a chair in the staff room. He doesn't sit in a cabin, or she doesn't sit in a cabin behind closed doors. They also take part. First of all, they also teach. They teach a couple of classes. And they also take part when required in school processes like serving the midday meal, substitution, supervising children, all of that. The principal is the school leader. But all leadership is not vested in the principal. The teachers take on a lot of leadership roles. You might say it's distributed leadership. The principal and the teachers together run the school, the day-to-day operations as well as the bigger decisions. Decision-making is extremely consultative and participative. Information is shared. Any decision in school, big or small, and sometimes they're handed down from on above, but any decision in school is, they sit together and they consult, they deliberate. Every teacher is au fait with why is a certain decision being made, what is the rationale, how is it going to be implemented. You don't have to speak to the principal for a new practice. You can speak to anybody and they'll tell you what they are trying to do. In decisions, the community, when it impacts them, is also involved. Sometimes the children are also consulted. I don't have the time to go into details of examples, which I would love to, but there is no time, 15 minutes. So, to give an example of community, our admissions committee consists of representatives of the community, the teacher group, the principal, and some people from the local foundation office. So the effort all around has been to make trust, dialogue, participation, inclusiveness lived in school processes. And to my mind, that is what culture is. It's all of the things that I have spoken about and more. Culture is this strange, nebulous thing which you can't see. And therefore, a lot of the time, you're not aware of it, but it's there everywhere, all the time, mediating every single experience in school. Every interaction, every process happens in the background of that culture. And it's like this invisible force which has the power to transform the collective consciousness of people. It impacts values, it impacts the decisions you take, the choices you make, the perspectives you form, the worldviews children form, the teachers, all of it. And and the thing is that it happens unconsciously. So to me, that's the power of and danger of culture, both. Because if you're not paying attention, you don't know, and when it gets, culture becomes a certain way. It can either be very empowering and nurturing, or it can be extremely toxic and disempowering, or anywhere in between. So today I want to make a case for actually looking at culture, the school culture, and looking at it by design and not by default. And the ways in which examining your culture, seeing what is reflected in it, how does it get formed, and the ways in which you might want to work on it to perhaps influence the way you want to, your teachers, the school leaders, and the children. Because culture impacts all. We have 6 schools, and one of the ways we've been able to get alignment across all our schools is by addressing culture. 2-3 years ago, we had a study conducted in our schools, a qualitative study where some of our teachers were asked, what is it that had helped them learn and grow? Without exception, all of them spoke about the feeling of being trusted, of having space to experiment, learn from making mistakes, of having the autonomy to teach in their classrooms without being supervised and monitored, of having the support of the principal, the trust of the principal, of being involved in school decisions, and therefore how it made them feel valued and acknowledged. What they were speaking about is culture. They didn't call it that. And a lot of what has been talked about here, to my mind, is culture. Some of what Sister Cyril said, and even many people in the previous panel said. So the question is, how does this happen? I don't know if there is a formula. But again, I'd just like to share with you some of the things that we did. Consider this, our teachers come from small towns, very traditional backgrounds, and very limited exposure. When they joined the foundation schools, huge expectations and demands were placed upon them over the years. First of all, as I said, our classrooms, because we have disadvantaged children, many of them are first-generation learners. There is absolutely no support at home, or non-existent. Some children have come to our school for the first time, because when we set up our schools, we actually went out and got children who were out of school. So there are children in class 3, 4, 5 who've never been to school. So each of our classrooms has this spectrum of learning levels where we have children who cannot even read and write and children who are age appropriate. And the teachers have to be able to address all these learning levels. Because if they don't, who is going to? There is nothing at home and there's no tuition. They've been asked to move away from rote. They've been asked to say, think of the textbook is not your Bible. They've been asked to teach so that children question. They learn to question the status quo. And all of this was very different from what our teachers, as I said, the kind of backgrounds they came from, were used to. And on top of that, there were other practices. They were required to stay beyond the hours that children stayed so that they could learn, they could plan, they could do TLMs, etc. Summer vacation is cut short so that teachers can get together and do workshops. A whole lot of things like this. I don't want to go into a list. So this was a real stretch for them, and recognizing this from the very beginning, we've tried very hard to build capacity and support and handhold them. In fact, the kind of support and handholding our principals and our teachers have had in terms of quality and quantity is quite tremendous. One of the reasons I think we've been able to do this is because of the nature of the organization that we are. We have a university on one side and we have a foundation. So we have access to resources, knowledge resources, relatively more easily than maybe some other people. But I want to differentiate capacity building from in-service training and workshop and that kind of mode. We looked at it a lot more holistically. One thing is that we made sure that we embedded a lot of the capacity building processes for teachers in their day-to-day routine. So, as a matter of routine, teachers are required to team teach, do collaborative planning, collaborate to develop curriculum. They struggled with a lot of this, but they had support in this activity. They were trusted and given something to do. The curriculum wasn't designed and given to them. They brought the experience and learning to it. Sharing meetings where they meet and they may discuss problems, they may discuss a problem child, they may discuss some reading they've had, they may just share something good they've done in class. Teleconferences, because we have also tried to connect across our 6 schools and to create a teacher community, a group. So these are kinds of things which were part of their job, where they learned by doing. And this not only built capacity, but it helps to create a certain kind of culture, a culture of learning and a culture of collaboration and reflection. The other thing is that right from the beginning, we've tried to make the whole process very, very supportive. So though I've talked about the expectations, practices were introduced gradually. And 2 minutes? 1 minute. Okay. Okay. So, and they had a lot of time for dialogue and, deliberation amongst themselves. So to very quickly just sum up, the 3 things that helped us. One was putting in place an everyday basis, some systems and structures which required teachers to behave a certain way. In the beginning, that behavior might have been compliance only and very superficial. But as they repeated it, they got better at it, and it actually changed relationships and influenced mindsets. The other thing was that getting them building capacity, doing workshops and things like that, of course. And the third thing was providing a lot of spaces for dialogue and discussion. They were allowed to process experience. The thing that was talked about a little earlier, that they had experiences, they were allowed to process experience, because you learn from experience only when you process. Otherwise, it continues to remain a blob out there. So if we want to change our schools, if we want to be able to prepare children to be socially responsible, if we're looking at a democratic, inclusive society, then this is something they have to live and experience in school every day, in every class, with every teacher, through every process, and across all the years in school, and not in little buckets and discrete programs and exposure visits and, value education class. And the only way to do that is to embed it in culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ghosh. Now we have Professor Batra.